We see a lot of interviews, TV shows, podcast things where there's lots of thought leaders interviewed about the decisions happening. And the thought leaders are rarely teachers on the ground. And I have noticed even in those where there are teachers or teacher leaders, there are people who haven't been in the classroom 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. So we really need the instructor, the teacher voice on the ground right now, not even like on the ground last year, right? Because now we're constantly changing with everything coming back.
You're listening to Denise. She's been teaching English to native and non-native speakers in a variety of settings over the past 2 decades. From teaching in a California prison, a village in Botswana as a Peace Corps volunteer, to the New York City public high schools, she finally found her home teaching in the community colleges. She's currently the online accessibility mentor and associate professor at the San Diego Miramar College, teaching online, hybrid, and in-person courses. She also teaches graduate students at the University of San Diego, and she herself is a doctoral candidate researching the impact of social presence factors in online learning success. She deeply believes in equitable, humanized online experiences that support student success, and I am so delighted to have her on the show with us today. How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin, and how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Saba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools. While there have been many conflicting narratives about the online teaching and learning experience, one thing has remained constant. Students tell us that they want to be engaged in learning. They want to feel connected to school, motivated to learn, and persist amidst challenges. They want to feel connected to their teachers, to their peers, and to their learning environment. I'm not a student in Denise's class, yet when I open my social media feed, I'm always curious if I'll get to see another one of the videos that she's posted for her course. It's her energy, enthusiasm, and warmth that draws me in and has me hooked within the first few seconds. For Denise, this has been a dynamic strategy as she sought to build a strong rapport with her students. I asked Denise to share how the research led her to choose this medium of creating videos to support her online learners.
I think it was a combination of seeing other people do videos, but also reading the research and realizing how important it is for students to know that I'm a real human being. And this was whether I was teaching online or whether I was teaching in person well before COVID. That an introductory video and putting a face, a human face in all of our like silliness and normalness and regular lives to a professor makes a huge difference before the class even begins to students feeling like I'm going to be welcomed, that I belong here, that my professor is a real person who will care about me. And when I first started making them, it was so funny because I would send like an email or something and you kind of hope the students read them or no. But then I would post something and then it would be like 2 minutes later, all these views or people messaging me or commenting and realizing that that's where the engagement was happening, that I was reaching students much more quickly through my videos. And now it's really funny. I posted something last week and shared it. And then I heard from a student from like 3 years ago. It was like, hey, professor, how's it going? And then another student was like, I remember you. And so this ongoing connection, I just think it's a really wonderful community that forms through being able to share those. And I have gotten really past this idea that the videos have to be perfect, because the first thing people say to me is like, I don't have the time to do that. And I do not exaggerate when I say it. I spend like 5 minutes on a video because I just do it. Unless something really disastrous happens, it's a one-take video. I just don't worry about what happens. My dog barks, my son walks by, I look funny, whatever's happening. And I think that those are actually the videos that they get the most views and engagement from my students. So being able to do it quickly and knowing that I'm reaching students, especially now that everything's online for me still, is the number one reason why I do it. It's the only reason why I do it for students. So I teach at the community college level. And so my research is related not just to that, but that's kind of where it stems from, and my interest in online education, but especially in reaching students of color, especially at the community college level. So people's research, like Dr. Luke Wood, who's at San Diego State, his research into how students of color, particularly Black students, need that validation and relationships come well before pedagogy. That until students realize that you care about them and that you're a real human being and you build mutual respect, authentic care and trust, until they feel that, it really doesn't matter what the content is. So if I drop, an introductory email that just lists the rules of the class and what we're going to cover and start handing out assignments without them making that connection, it's just not going to happen. And that comes before everything else. The work and the research of Dr. Zaretta Hammond and culturally responsive teaching has been super important to me as well. Just the idea of giving, wise feedback to students, being this warm demander that doesn't just sympathize with students, but, pushes the idea of tough love, like pushes them to the next level, but in a warm way, and being there for them, and students knowing like this instructor cares about me and loves me, but I better perform and I'm going to reach the goals. And if I need support, she's going to be there for me, but we're not going to just slide by. But all of those things together have been really important to me.
Putting a human face to a name makes a difference, she says, not just to her current students, but for her former students as well. Denise immediately addresses the number one concern so many have when it comes to creating video. Does it have to be perfect? Over the past 2 years, from Instagram to the videos we share in our courses, there's been a shift in people not wanting perfect. Part of what builds an authentic connection is the lack of perfection. It makes us more relatable and encourages others to experiment with creation as well. I asked Denise to share what she uses to create her videos and why she posts them on social media.
So I have been using Clips. There's tons of apps that live caption. Clips is a free iOS app, and accessibility is a huge concern. So if we don't make sure everything we do is inclusive for all our students, then the culture of care is not really true. And depending on where our students are from and their challenges, captions are hugely important. So I actually don't post anything without captions, without alt text, anything like that. So Clips is really great because I could do it on a mobile phone. Like I literally hold it up, record. You've seen me stop at like walking my dog or like sitting on the couch. So I just hit record. It'll live caption and then it's editable. And it's actually really well done. I don't have to correct too much. I edit live on my phone. And then I just download it to my phone and then I can share it to the LMS that I use, which is Canvas for my college. But then I just put it up on Instagram because it's faster. So I just throw it up there right away. I link it to students and then I can just grab that Instagram link and share it with students on Canvas. I can share it on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I don't share every single video I make for my students across all platforms. I share kind of the more general ones, more specific kind of content-based or lessons or specific for a class. I usually keep those within the course content.
Live captioning. I love how Clips, an app for iOS devices, is an all-inclusive experience, allowing you to create videos and captions all in one. Another shortcut I recently discovered was to just record on your phone. And if you upload to Instagram stories, you can add the captions directly in and then download the video without even having to post it to your feed. In fact, if you head to my Instagram profile, I have a tutorial for you today on how you can do this. In addition to watching Denise's videos, I've enjoyed her posts about the challenges and opportunities that online teaching and learning present. As someone who's been teaching in this space for over 2 decades, I asked her to share more about her thoughts on this topic.
Yes, I've been a community college professor for a very long time. And I was thinking back to it. My first position was at Harold Washington College, which is one of the city colleges of Chicago. And I started teaching there 21 years ago. And I remember I had floppy disks, and I remember that USB, the thumb drives were new. And I remember the tech person being like, we're going to use these now. And I remember thinking, we're going to lose those. So this is kind of how far we've come. I was really interested in incorporating technology at that time. And I started doing things like blogging with my students and using VoiceThread. I've always taught English language learners. So leveraging technology for students to be able to share their voices, be creative, and practice learning language skills at the same time was really exciting for me. Over the years, I taught then at City College of San Francisco, where I started getting really involved with online teaching. I got trained through the online network of educators, and then came to San Diego Miramar College and was teaching hybrid online courses for English and ESOL. And the thing about it is, well, first of all, community colleges we accept and we serve 100% of students. So, and I love that line. I can't remember who said it, that community colleges accept the top 100% of students. We serve everyone, and online courses were a huge part of our offerings to students before COVID. That the number of courses online were already on a steady rise before COVID because it offers equitable access to students. So we were already there. We were a smaller subset for sure. So I just remember when I was teaching a portion of my classes online, I remember people saying things to me like, oh, it must be nice to just be relaxing at home twice a week, And I'm like, okay, there's a lot involved with what we do to make a really engaged, supportive, amazing online class. But it was really not a lot of people really, really knew what was going on to make that happen. Then, of course, March 2020, we all went remote. And suddenly people are messaging me like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Oh my gosh, I'm working 24/7. Oh my gosh, how do we do this? And I think that this pandemic has really just allowed everyone to understand what that's like. People who I know, colleagues were like, I would never teach this specific discipline online. I just don't think it's work. I would hate it. Now, literally, I just heard someone on a call yesterday tell me that they love teaching their class online. They want to keep teaching it online. They never thought it was possible. So, it really pushed us to think outside the box. And those of us who weren't really sure if this would be a good fit have found a way to make it happen. And the same thing has been true for students. I just came off this call with students, many of whom were mothers, were working parents who are doing multiple kinds of activities that don't really allow them to come on campus. And online works for them. And they're really excited that they can continue their education. It's frankly the only way that they would be able to at this time to continue their education. Challenges, of course, in terms of equity, making sure that students have the technology that is available and necessary to be online. We had a lot of issues during the pandemic with students being in spaces where they might not have strong Wi-Fi, they might not have the software needed on their computer to be able to complete the kinds of work that was expected of them. Being online means that you're in a space where it's, we're looking at my office. I'm actually right now able to be in a separate room, but many of our students are not. So if you're on an online Zoom call and your instructor wants you to be on camera and be doing something, but you've got your family behind you, you've got someone cooking, you've got kids, those are spaces where that's really difficult to do. So those are all definite challenges in the online environment.
If there's one thing that's behind us, it's that working remotely is easy. As we've all learned, it's anything but. In fact, many of the challenges that we hear come as a result of having substituted in-person practices online, leading to disengagement and what has become a very popular term, Zoom fatigue. Teaching, learning, and working in remote and hybrid environments requires a new set of skills and strategies. Those who have embraced them have found that it opens up opportunities for more inclusive experiences that provide people with the flexibility and autonomy that they often need. If you're interested in learning more about the strategies and digital tools to facilitate hybrid and remote experiences that leave people feeling energized and productive, then I invite you to join my upcoming workshop on March 10th. You'll be able to learn more by visiting www.designingschools.org. And I'll also add a link for you in the show notes. These are particularly important strategies as one of the greatest challenges that we've heard from educators and just teams across different organizations, from the business world to K-12 to higher ed, is how oftentimes people do not feel included in the dialogue and decisions about change within their organization. And now, more than ever, it's imperative that we move away from making decisions in silos and towards designing with the people in our organizations. I asked Denise what the challenges have been for many professors in higher education.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we see a lot. I appreciate being on this podcast. We see a lot of interviews, TV shows, podcast things where there's lots of thought leaders interviewed about the decisions happening. And the thought leaders are rarely teachers on the ground. And I have noticed even in those where there are teachers or teacher leaders, there are people who haven't been in the classroom 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago. So we really need the instructor, the teacher voice on the ground right now, not even like on the ground last year, right? Because now we're constantly changing with everything coming back, then going remote, a new variant. I think it depends a lot on the institution, right? The leadership where you are and how much that is included. I think that as we return to a new normal, that hopefully we don't go back to the old normal and know that there's, it's never going to be what it was, which is great because now we have all of these other skills, knowledge, and opportunities to move forward. But we do really need to have the faculty voice. I think it's difficult. I mean, I am an associate professor where I teach. I don't have decision-making ability to the type of program offerings that there are really. I mean, our union, our district kind of has regulations about how much you can teach online and just the way in which we move forward. Of course, I voice my thoughts. We have plenty of meetings where we can share our ideas, but we are limited. We are constrained. So I just hope that as, people move into leadership and that leadership listens to really the realities of what's happening in our world. I think that higher education is very resistant to change, to be honest.
Denise echoes many of the sentiments that Nima shared when she was on the podcast a few weeks ago. The challenges Denise shares are choices that leaders are actively making. If you're in a leadership position, bringing in diverse voices to learn about all aspects of the experience is so important right now. When thinking specifically about schools, not only is it important to bring the teacher voice to learn about their experience, but they're also able to provide insights into the student experience and what they're seeing and hearing from the students in their classes. Student voice is rarely brought into the conversation when teams meet to talk about launching initiatives. I asked Denise, with her students having experienced online learning for the past 2 years, what are their observations and what do they want learning to look like moving forward?
Yeah, it's interesting because just to follow up on what we just said, that student voice. So when we were planning for this semester, it was like, do we just go all in on back in person? Do we have half online? Do we have hybrid? What do we do? And in my surveys of students, just in particular with my classes, students were like, we want to have plenty of online options. The landscape of education has changed. We don't really know when it's safe to come back or not. We've adapted to it. We kind of like it now. And so students were requesting, these online options. So a great example is my schedule. In the spring, I had scheduled some online classes and one in-person class. So the in-person class only had 3 students registered because students, as they told us, wanted online options. So that class was canceled, So it's interesting because you can ignore the voices, but then when push comes to shove, your student body is going to, at least at the college level, make those choices happen, because if there's no one signing up for the in-person class, then we're not going to have the in-person class. And that's kind of what happened. My students ask for plenty of ways to engage online beyond text, really, is what it comes down to. So they often comment that they're really excited to see me every week on video. They are excited and happy when we have video projects where they get to create something and share. They're excited when they get to hop on Zoom for a meet and greet. They're excited when we do different types of activities where they're engaging with each other. They're asking for more of that. So when I do surveys and things, what they don't want is like death by discussion board where they post once, reply twice every week, They are asking for more things like portfolios, which I think we might talk about, where they get to be creative and do things that are authentic to them and showcase their work in ways that is shared with each other. I think that transactional experience is over where students, like, for example, I teach writing, like write a paper and then turn it into me and only I read it. We're beyond that, right? So how about we all publish it to a blog, or we all work on a digital photo story or a portfolio where we then share with each other and learn from each other and be like a published piece of work, not just something that I'm turning into the instructor. So those are the kinds of experiences that they get really excited about.
Transactional experiences are over, says Denise. Students don't want to just do an assignment and turn it in. They want to do work that feels personal, work that they can showcase in a portfolio. Like many of us, students have really come to enjoy the autonomy and flexibility that comes with remote learning. A decade ago, Daniel Pink wrote the book Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. He shared that in today's workplaces that require creativity and innovation, people thrive in an environment that fosters autonomy, mastery, and purpose. While many people enjoy and want flexible work environments, though, that autonomy requires us to have a strong culture of shared values, norms, behaviors, systems, and tools that will allow everyone to be successful as self-directed individuals. The challenge for many traditional organizations and schools where remote or hybrid work was not an option pre-pandemic is that the systems, norms, and tools were not in place to foster success in these environments. It's why you see so many conflicting stories about some organizations thriving in remote and hybrid environments and others just waiting for us to go back to normal. This isn't just an opportunity to shift how adults are working. It's an opportunity to enhance skills that students have also developed over the past 2 years during remote learning. The Global Online Academy, who have been publishing incredible articles and posts during this time, have recently shared student reflections about what they've listened to and heard from their students over the past 2 years. Students are telling them that they've gained increased self-advocacy skills. They've improved their written communication skills. They've learned to be more flexible and adaptable as they've managed many changes, both big and small. When they worked from home, they learned to manage distractions while also learning the importance of self-care and knowing when they needed to take breaks, get exercise, and reach out for support. They also shared that they have improved time management skills and an increased comfort with technological tools and resources that support their learning. Like adults, young people also want flexibility and autonomy to be a part of work and school moving forward. The challenge and opportunity lies in how intentional we are when we design our time, both synchronous and asynchronous, by asking, how might we work better together? Denise highlights the value students have come to see from having an online portfolio. I can't imagine having been a student looking forward to career fairs and other networking events, only to realize that the only place to do all of that was now online. I ask her to share why she introduces portfolios to her students and the benefits that she's seen.
So, anything that we all do in the classroom, especially with technology, is just like fits and starts and mistakes and do-overs. So I've been working on it for years and just gotten better every time. And I will say that I had really a big change in how I work with portfolios last summer using when I did a community practice with 3CSN, the Community College Success Network. I think I used that acronym correctly, on e-portfolios, and made some major changes in how I do that. But I remember back in the day, there were courses and programs I worked with where students had like a binder and we'd spend all this time like hole punching things and like making sure that the tab dividers were correct. And then again, they would turn in this binder to me, and then I would be walking out of the classroom with like 35 binders and trying to get them to my office, and then people wouldn't pick them up later. It was just this weird thing, So it was like, how do we bring this to a digital space where it's not this final assessment, but a way to showcase their progress and their improvement over the course of the semester. And then it's something they can share with others when they leave. So that's where I started with that in terms of portfolios for my writing classes, for my English classes, and my English language learning classes. Over time, I've just built it up to be more and more something where they can include multimedia. So they're making like a video reflection. They are incorporating images and links to their own passions and pursuits. They are working on it from the beginning of the semester. So like day one, I'm like, we're going to be working on this portfolio. Please write a short bio about yourself, and we're going to add that right away. And then having these touch points throughout the semester where you keep adding and you're sharing it with a small group throughout. So it's not this big, heavy kind of replacement of a test at the end of the semester. You're just working through it. I love that students share them with their families and friends. I teach students from, all different places. And so they'll say, I shared it with my uncle back home in Afghanistan. And like, he commented on it, or, it's just really great. Or people will say, I've gone on, to transfer, I've gone on to a job or something. I'm able to show them this portfolio and the things that I've done. And I just think that really has been amazing to see the reach beyond the classroom, which is what you want. And I learned so much more about students. They share so much more. They're so much more committed to the work and the improvement when they have a way to showcase their progress that's more interactive and creative.
When we create work that matters, we're proud to share it with the world, no matter what age we are. As Denise shares, her students, who are adults, are excited to go home and share their work with others. Whereas yesterday our work was often put on the fridge, today you can put it on the internet for more than just those at home to see. I love how Tony Wagner says, the world doesn't care what you know, it cares what you can do with what you know. I often share how creating a portfolio and online presence shifted the type of work that I was able to do. I graduated in 2007 and spent the early years of my career aimlessly applying to just what was available. When I began building a portfolio and an online presence, and I used the internet to show the world what I could do with what I know, instead of applying for jobs, I was being recruited for positions and connecting with people who had shared values, shared norms, and shared beliefs about the challenges and opportunities that we were excited to be working on. It's also what opened the door to working with one of my favorite organizations, EdTech Teacher. And it also opened the door to being recruited by Apple. I'm often asked how I made the transitions that I have in my career. And without a doubt, I always say it's because I invested time in building an online portfolio and presence. I asked Denise to share, did her students have prior experience with portfolios, and what was it like for them to begin this journey?
I mean, like most things, there's a range, but I would say lots and lots of students without experience in that, and just I try to kind of tiptoe into it, do little things along the way. I never start with the tech, right? Start with the goal and the writing or the work, and then ease into the tech part of it, because you don't want the focus to be the tech. It's not about this portfolio. It's about you showcasing your improvement. But yeah, it is definitely new for students. I have used Adobe Spark Page. We're trying out Wix this semester. So, it's that learning curve of learning language, since I'm an English professor, but also learning kind of that tech part that goes along with it. But I mean, this is also just part of life. I always think about this when people say, like, I don't want to have to worry about tech. I'm like, well, how are they banking? How are they going to the grocery store? How are they almost like it's already part of our lives, right? It's just a regular skill. So it's not like the special, like technology with a T, but capital T, it's like little t, like it's just part of it, just part of what we're doing.
Absolutely. No, that's so well said. So you're also a student yourself. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about why you decided to go back to school and what you're researching.
There's never been a more humbling experience than going back to school after some time. But yeah, so I'm doing I'm in the final stages of my doctorate in the joint doctoral program between Cal State San Marcos and UCSD. And I had been thinking about doing a doctorate for at least 10 to 15 years. It was just never the right time. It's not really the right time now, but it was definitely not the right time previously having young children. And I also, thinking back, I didn't really know what I wanted to research, right? So the time appears when it's the right time. So as I was getting more and more involved over the last handful of years with online education and kind of diving into coursework and research on my own and seeing that success gap or that opportunity gap between online and in person was shrinking, like well before COVID, we were closing kind of that opportunity gap in terms of success and retention in online courses overall at the community colleges, the California community colleges. But once you disaggregate the data, you see that the opportunity gap is still there for students of color. So Black students, Filipino students like myself, Latinx students, Indigenous students. So why was the success rate, narrowing for overall? But we have populations of students who that gap is still there, who benefit most from online because, as we mentioned, this opens access to more students, right? So my research, I became really interested in finding out what was happening, not from a deficit mindset of what were these students not prepared for or what were they not doing, but what could we as faculty, as leaders, as institutions do to make sure that all of our students are successful online because we know it provides access. So that was my initial hope with my research, and this was pre-COVID. I really wanted to hear from students. So we talked about who are the thought leaders interviewed for why things aren't going what we want. But really, we just need to hear from the students. What's happening? Where's the connection point where faculty, institutions, leadership can make sure we're doing what we need to support you in being successful online? So my research then was kind of merging that gap of what I knew from supporting students of color in community colleges, culturally responsive teaching, but moving that into an online space. So all we know about validation and empathy and, support and relationships. So how do we do that online? And does that make improvements in that setting? So I just completed all of the interviews that I did with students about their experiences online. And just they said amazing things, learned so much about them. And I'm just in that, that stage, Saba. I'm in that stage of synthesizing everything and bringing that together so that hopefully it can inform, all of us that are hoping to do better by everyone, by our students.
When I share that cultures of innovation begin with a culture of empathy, this is exactly what I mean. Starting with technology rarely works. We need to start with understanding the challenges and motivations of the people we're working with. This week, I shared an article on what this looked like when I was Director of Innovative Learning at the University of Southern California. Our students said the same. We don't want to learn technology and content at the same time. So we created an orientation where we used design thinking to introduce them to our core set of technology tools that we were using. This week, I wrote about how I created and facilitated this experience and provide you with the resources so that you can replicate it with your students as well. Very few people sit at the intersection of such a diverse range of experiences the way Denise does. At a time where people are questioning the value of higher education, I'm curious to hear her thoughts and the challenges that she sees for the industry moving forward.
I think that is a difficult conversation that I had before starting it and also during it, and especially right now as I'm in the final stages of it. I think that in the higher ed spaces where I work as a female, as a woman of color in these spaces, having a degree still matters. And I think if I did a bunch of badges and a bunch of other courses and things that perhaps gave me the same information, it still doesn't come with the status of a doctorate in the spaces where I want to have a voice and where people will actually listen to me as a woman of color. So I think that matters a huge amount, actually, more than people maybe are aware of. But also diving into the actual dissertation practice and the research, I think being able to conduct that, through a university, publish it as a dissertation, and then move into creative ways of sharing it as you have Saba maybe into a podcast or a documentary or a portfolio, other peer-reviewed articles. That I think that is a leap that is difficult to do without that title. I think that faculty are really tired. We talk a lot about self-care and how to manage all of this. But for me, obviously, when we moved remote, I was okay. I mean, I was excited because I understood the online space. I wasn't worried about supporting the students, but it's different during a pandemic. Obviously, it's different as a working parent who has children at home and all the things that we juggle. And now we're going, into 2 years of this with constant changes, moments where we think we've kind of reached a point where things are going to get better. And then we have Delta and then we have Omicron. So I think that we're all just really, really tired. People are definitely overworked. And I think there is a limit to how much you can sustain that, right? So you can sustain that for a semester or two, but to sustain that for 2 years without physical, emotional exhaustion is really difficult. So I think that beyond kind of like this idea of self-care, my friend Diamudra talks about this a lot, who I know you know her as well, just boundaries. Like, where are our boundaries for our time and when we work and when we rest? What is supporting students so that they can be the best that they can be? And what is supporting myself and not answering, some messages late at night, even though a student has a really important question, but knowing that that's time and that's my boundary for my family, right? And my own rest. So I think that that's a challenge. I think, as we mentioned before, the slowness to change of higher education, trying to just stay with it and know that change does happen, although it can just be slower than we see in other industries. I think the mindset is the same, flexibility, agility, positivity. I hear a lot of times people being, a little bit negative about things like social media or technology or being on our phones too much. And there's truth to all of that. But there's also really, really exciting things happening in those spaces. So looking for the positivity, the connection points in those spaces, and then making sure you have boundaries for yourself as well.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.